Okay, Zok Tehillah Gemara. Eventually, this might work. Okay, where are we holding over here? Okay, we'll start from Yitzhak Shabbos, Shtaim Shinar, but it's just the beginning of it. So it should go pretty fast. Zok Tehillah Gemara. Yitzhak Shabbos, Shtaim Shinar, and our Mishnah did not elaborate on the details. So Tan Awesome, we learned in Masechah Shabbos, Yitzhak Shabbos, Shtaim Shinar, B'fnim Shehein Shtaim B'fnim Ushtaim Shinar B'chutz. So you see, there's a lot more information to be offered up in Masechah Shabbos that the Tana here in Shavuos didn't offer up. So Maish Nahacha, the Tana Shtaim Shem Dal, V'sulai, Maish Nahasim, the Tana Shtaim Shem Marba B'fnim, Ushtaim Shem Marba B'chutz. It was much more detailed. Zakt Gemara, Hasam the Iker Shabbasu, in Masechah Shabbos, where that's the focus, Tani Avis V'toldos. Hachad Lav Iker Shabbasu, Avois Tani, V'toldos Lai Tani. So the Gemara says, oh, now you introduced a new concept of Avos and Toldos. So you're telling me that here in Shavuos we're only discussing Avos. Okay, what are Avos? Avos Maninu, Yitzios. It means you're taking something out, meaning from Rishus HaYochid to Rishus HaRabim. For more Yitzios Tarti Havyon. There's only two examples of Yitzios. Either when the Balabayis took something from inside to outside, or if the Oni put his hand in and took something from inside to outside. So how do you have a Shtaim Shein Arba? Maybe there's four cases, but two of the cases, although they're usher, they're not chayiv, and that is if either the ani or the balbais did only an akira without a hanacha, or only a hanacha without an akira, and maybe the two cases that are speaking where he didn't do both a hanacha and an akira, those are the second half. The arba of the Shtaim Shin Arba. Zok Gemara, that's not an option because we already established right away on Daf Beis that there has to be a carbon for each one. But Dumyo Damaris Nagoyim Katani. For Maris Nagoyim, we see that all four of the Shtaim Shin Arba create a chiyuv carbon. Mahasam Kulu Lechiyuva, Avacha Kulu Lechiyuva. So they're all a chiyuv. Elo Amar Papa. Hasam the Iker Shabbos, when we're talking about Masechah Shabbos, where that's the focus, Tani Chiyuva Ipiture. There it lists cases that you're chayiv, where either the Balbayis or the Oni made both an Akira and Anafa. Hacha Chiyuvi Tani Ufiture Loi Tani. So all four cases by us are cases where there will be a chiyuv. What exactly is that? Chiyuvi Ma'ininu Yitzios. What are the chiyuvim? The chiyuvim for a carbon is if you take something from Rishus HaYochid and transfer it into Rishus HaRabim with an Akira and Hanacha. But for Gemara, Yitzias Tartehu the Havyon. There's only two examples of Yitzias that would net a carbon. Zok Gemara, when we say Chayiv, we mean Shtayim Da'itza U'Shtayim Da'achnasa. We're also including two cases where you took an object from the Rishus HaRabim and brought it into the Rishus HaYochid. Gemara, but the Mishnah doesn't say that. Well, Yitzios Katani, the wording of the Mishnah is Yitzios, meaning you took it from Rishus HaYochid out into the Rishus HaRabim. Amabashi, Tana Hachnasa Nami Haitzah Karila. Our Tana uses the heading, the title Haitzah, to refer even to Achnasa. And the Gemara is going to say in a moment, and there's some logic to it, because you're always taking it out. You're either taking it out of the Rishus HaYochid, or you're taking it out of the Rishus HaRabim, right? Whenever you're transferring. Mimai, where do you see that this is what the Tana did? The Tanan we learned in the Mishnah in Shabbos. Hamoitzi mirshus l'rshus chayiv. It does say moitzi yochid l'rshus harab. It says mirshus l'rshus. So milo yaskina on the kama'ayil iyulei. It would also be referring to a case where you brought it from Rishus HaRabim into the Rishus HaYochid. V'kakari lo haitzah. Yet the Tana refers to that under the heading of haitzah. So you see, the Tana considers any transfer of Rishuyos Haitzah. Frank Gemara v'dilmo kamakim and Rishus HaYochid l'Rishus HaRabim. Maybe the Rishus l'Rishus referred to in this Mishnah is only when you're taking it from Rishus HaYochid to Rishus HaRabim. So Gemara imkain nisnei hamoitzim Rishus HaYochid l'Rishus HaRabim. Then that's what the Mishnah should say. It should be specific. Why did the Mishnah use a generic term? My Rishus l'Rishus. It's mashma that no matter how you transfer from where to where, it's always going to net an iser. Now, filim Rishus HaRabim l'Rishus HaYochid. Vika kari lo haitzah. And the Tana uses the word haitzah referring to that case. So now the Gemara wants to know, okay, you've proven to us that that's what the Tana did, but how does the Tana understand it? Why would the Tana use a term Haitzah when it's actually discussing Hachnasa? The time of my, the teretz is Tana Kola Kiris Chayfetz Mimakaimoi Haitzah Karila. Anytime you are changing the location of a Chayfetz, he refers to that as Haitzah. Omar Ravina, Masnisan Nami Deka. If you look at the Mishnah in Shabbos, you'll see that the Mishnah in Shabbos doesn't just consider Hachnasa to be considered under the heading of Eitzah like B'di'evet. You see that Hachnasa is a class A example of Eitzah. How do you see that? The Katani, the Mishnah starts with the following title: Yitzios Shabbos Shtayim Shenar B'Mifnim and Shtayim Shenar B'Chutz. And then the Mishnah elaborates and gives examples. The very first example that the Mishnah offers up is a case of Achnasa, the Kamafarish Achnasa. If Achnasa was just like a B'di'evet Haitzah, so then first the Tana would have introduced cases of real Haitzah, and then the Mishnah would have said, and by the way, it also includes these Achnasas. But the very first example of Haitzah that the Tana decided to present was a case of Achnasa. Shmami no, that Achnasa is a very, very appropriately considered Haitzah. Rava has a whole different shot. The Gemara asked, how could you say that we're referring to Shtayim Shenar B'Chiyuv? It says Haitzah. And Haitzah, there's only two examples of Chiyuv. So the first shot we just finished was Hachnasa and Haitzah are the same heading. Rava said no. When it says Haitzah is Shtayim, the word Haitzah is not translated as taking something out. It's translated as Rishuyos Katani. Haitzah means a Rishus, a domain. There is only two domains, Rishus HaYachid and Rishus HaRabim. So Katani Rishuyi Shabbos Shtayim, there are two domains, and out of that will spring a variety of cases that will actually be four cases of Chiyuv, two of Haitzah, two of Achnasa. Maris Nagoyim Shtayim Shein Arba. Tanan Hasam. Maris Nagoyim. So now we're getting into the Mishnah in Nagoyim in detail. Our Mishnah just says Shtayim Shein Arba, it does not elaborate. There it says Shnayim Shein Arba, and it lists them off. Baheres is the brightest white. That's Azah Kishelik. It's bright white like snow. Shniela, a secondary toilda of Baheres, would be white Kisira Hechel, which is white, but it's not as bright white. Se'es is another Mara mentioned in the Torah. That's bright Katzemer Lovan, which is actually brighter than Sira Hechel, but not quite as bright as Shelek. And Shniela, the secondary toilda of Tzemer, would be Kekrumbeya. So if you had to line them up in order of brightness, the most bright is Baheres, which is Shelek. The second bright is Se'es, which is Ketzemer. The third bright is Sid HaHechel. And the fourth bright is, or the lightest of the whites, is Krum Beitza. Those will be the pecking order. Now, it's just worthwhile to take a quick peek in the psukim, which we just learned last Shabbos, as to how the Torah presents these different colors, because the Gemara is going to now be delving into it. So it says in the pasuk in Tazria, Adam kiyeh va'ar b'sarai se'es oisapachas oivaheres. Now the Rashi already addressed twice since the beginning of the parak that sapachas is not a av. It's the se'es and the beheres that are av. Beheres is the most white. Se'es is a little bit less white. Se'es is like Semer. Beheres is like Shelek. Sapachas is just a toiled of Se'es, even though it's mentioned in the Torah, it's not one of the avos. And then it says V'hoya, and it is Ba'ar B'tzari L'negatzaras. From the word Sapachas, the Gemara is going to learn that the Torah is teaching us that not just the Se'es is a Mar of Tumah, but even things Tofaloi, even toldus of Se'es will be Tumah. Because the Sapachas V'hoya. V'hoya means there'll be Nagoyim. So the V'hoya is saying any variety of these colors will be Tamei. And another thing we should just point out, because the Gemara is going to introduce it a little bit later, is it says in the pasuk referring to a nega, it calls it nega adamdam. Let me see if I could find where it says it in the pasuk, and because the Gemara does talk about nega adamdam soon. Let me see if I can find it over here. Here it is. Beheres Levana Adam Domes. So there's something called a white Beheres with some red tinging in it. So that's an issue that's going to come up a little bit later today, if we get there. Okay, so Zog to Gemara. Mars Nagoyim, Stein Shaharba, Tanhosam, Mars Nagoyim, Stein Shaharba, Beheres Asakashalak, Shnilak Sidhechel, says Ketzemer Lovan, Shnilak Kumbetz. Now, so if you're looking at how they're paired, the Beheres, which is the brightest, would be its toilda would be not number 2, which is Se'es, but number 3, which would be Kesira Hechel, right? And Se'es, which is in the number 2 position of whiteness, its toilda would be number 4. If you look at the way this Mishnah that we just quoted lays it out. And the reason why we're talking about Abbas and told us is we're talking about if there's different colors together, will they combine? So Amar Chanina, Man Tana Maris Nagoyim. Who is the Tana of this Mishnah that we just quoted that pairs up Beheres with Beheres, which is snow white, to Sid white, and pairs up wool white to Krumbeya white? That the Loi Rabbi Kiva, that would not be consistent with Rabbi Kiva, because Rabbi Kiva holds you can't be Meshadach 1 and 3, and you can't be Meshadach 2 and 4. You could only be Meshadach 2 consecutive numbers to each other. The Rabbi Kiva, if you want to suggest that this Mishnah that we just quoted is consistent with Rabbi Kiva, Kiva and Amar Zula Maila Mizu, Zula Maila Mizu, since Rabbi Kiva said that you could only be Meshadach, you could only combine 2 maris that are consecutive numbers, it's impossible. Imkain Tiharta Sid Heichel Militzaref. Sid Heichel is not going to connect anything because Sid Heichel is in position 3, which means although our Mishnah says that Sid Heichel combines with Sheleg with Beheres, according to Rabbi Kiva, that will be impossible because Se'es is in between, and it's jumping from position 3 to position 1. That could not happen.
Also, it only mentions 3. Right?
No, it only mentions 2. So Pachas is not even discussed here. So Se'ez and Beheresh are the 2 mains. And the Mishnah is saying, and we're going to need to eventually discover, how do you know these secondary colors count at all? Right? We're going to have to find a makor for that. But right now the Mishnah is telling us what the halacha is. And Rabbi Kiva seems to disagree with the arrangement of the Mishnah, because Rabbi Kiva holds something could only be combined with a number that's consecutive to it. So 2 might be able to be combined with 1 and with 3. 3 might be able to be combined with 2 and 4, but you can't jump up. So if that's the case, where are we going to have a problem? We're going to have the problem with Sid Heichel, because it could never be mitzaref to any other type of nega. Because think about it. B'hadiman litrafe. Who are we going to be mitzaref with? Litrafe b'hadi beheres. If you want to connect it to beheres, well, the problem is Sid is in position 3, beheres is in position 1. Ika sa'es dadivimine. You have sa'es which is in position 2, that's a higher level of white than that of Sid Heichel. Now, litrafe b'hadi sa'es, if you want to connect it to Seish, you can't do that because our mission just said that each color has to be connected to its Av. You have to keep the Avos and the Toldos paired. And the Sida Heichel does not pair with Seish. Seish Lav Tolda Deyu. So, Frek Gemara, that's a very good kasher. And you're proving from Sida Heichel that our Mishnah that we quoted is not consistent with Rabbi Kiva. But why did you focus on Sida Heichel? Wouldn't you have the same problem with Krumbeya as well? Yachi Krumbeya Nami, Bahadiman Litrafe. You want to be mitzarefit to Se'ez, but the problem is Sid Heichel is in between. So you're going from 4 to 2. So why isn't that equally schwer? Why are you honing in on Sid Heichel to show the inconsistency between our Mishnah and Rabbi Kiva? It seems like Krumbeya would have the same problem. So why? Because Litrafe Bahadi Se'ez, Ikasid Aleph Minei, and Litrafe Bahadi Sid, La Var Minei. They're part of a different group. Right? We said Sid Heichel, we were Meshadach with Beheres, and Krumbeya, we're being Meshadach with Seis. So that's our problem. Zog Gemara, no. Krumbeya would not have been a problem. You know why? Because as follows. Haimai, Bishlama Beloy Sid Heichel, if it wasn't for the problem that we had uncovered with where we're going to attach Shirhecho, according to Rabbi Kiva, Krum Beitza loy kasha, we wouldn't have had a difficulty. Why? The Afagav, the Krum Beitza, mitasoi de seis, even though Krum Beitza is in the seis category and it's two removed, we don't have a problem with two removed. You know why? Because there's a special gilui in the Torah that when it comes to seis, you would include even two removed. Why? Because it says, Rachmon Amar v'laseis v'lasapachas. Sapachas is tfeila l'seis, even though it's not even near in color. Avagav the minchas minei tuva. Even though it's much light, it's a much lighter white than the seis. So from the fact that the Torah connects sapachas to seis, it shows that by seis we're not so strict. Seis will allow anything to connect to it. So therefore, Krum Beya, even though it's two removed from seis, since the Torah said seis v'sapachas v'hoyel l'negatzuras, therefore we could skip levels and we can combine level 4, which is Krum Beya, to level 2, which is seis. Elasid heichel kasha, but this we know where it says sapachas in connection with seis. But Harris doesn't have that, right? Because the lashon pasuk is seis or sapachas or baharis. So the sapachas is connected to the seis, but we can't use sapachas to modify baharis and to say baharis includes everything, because sapachas is after seis.
Yeah, it's also before
Right? So that the Gemara is going to bring such an opinion soon that says since sapachas is in between, it applies to both. But right now, the Gemara is taking the position that sapachas only applies to seis. So Zok to Gemara, and therefore Sid Heichel has nowhere to connect to because you can't connect it to Baharis according to Rabbi Kiva because it's two levels up. Elo Sid Heichel Kasha, Elo Mechaber to Masnisin Deloy Rabbi Kiva, we have to agree that Rabbi Kiva, who holds it's all sequential, Zula Maila Mizu, will not be consistent with our Mishnah, who doesn't have an issue about jumping. He holds you can connect because, again, of course, our Mishnah would learn that Sapachas applies equally to both, like Dovi said, but that's clearly not Rabbi Kiva's opinion. So, Frank the Gemara, you're talking about this Rabbi Kiva who says it's all sequential. Where did Rabbi Kiva say this? Where do we see that this is what Rabbi Kiva said? Zok the Gemara, and this next Gemara is the ultimate example of Talmudic logic. If it's from the following situation where Rabbi Yosy asked, where Rabbi Shua ben Karcha, which means Rabbi Shua, the son of Rabbi Kiva, who was the Kereach, who was bald, he asked his father a question. And from the way Rabbi Shua ben Karcha asked his father the question, the Gemara is going to figure out what Rabbi Kiva must have told Rabbi Yeshua, that Rabbi Yeshua responded to him with the following question, and that's how we're going to build this whole thing. It's like the ultimate in Talmudic logic. So Rabbi Yossi, I love this shtickle because it's such Talmudic logic, building such a big shtickle Torah out of one little comment. Rabbi Yossi, Shol Yeshua b'noi Shol Rabbi Kiva me Rabbi Kiva. So Rabbi Shua ben Karcha was the son of Rabbi Kiva, and he asked his father the following question: Mipnei ma omru, why did we say Maris Negoyim? So at this point, we don't even know precisely what Rabbi Kiva said. Yeah, because Rabbi Kiva was called a Kerech, he was called a Baldi. Rashi says that. Rabbi Kiva was bald, so he was called Yeshua, the son of the Baldi. Okay, so why is it that the Goyim are listed off as Shnaim Shenaber? Now, right now, we don't even know how Rabbi Kiva listed off anything. We just know the question that his son asked him. And we're going to have to figure out from the question that his son asked him what he must have told his son before that. So Amar Loi, so they asked him, the Imlav Ma Yoimru, what should I have said? So we don't know exactly what Rabbi Kiva said, but in this questioning, Rabbi Shua said, I don't like what you said. Well, what should I have said? You know what you should have said? One blanket statement. Yoimru mikrum beitza ulamai latome. Anything that's brighter than Krum Beitza is Tamei. So you didn't have to list off any type of list, any type of order. You could have just said one big category, anything that's whiter than Krum Beitza is Tamei. That was the question that he asked. Amar Loi, you know why the colors were listed off? Omer loy loymar, to teach us shemitztarfin zemze, to teach us that these colors, if you have a nega that's comprised of multiple brightnesses of white, you could combine them all. Omer loy. So we told him that doesn't explain why it was listed off, because you know what you could have said? The Braita could have just said, Mikrum Beitu Ulamaila Tame, and Umitztarfin Zemzeh. And we would have had all the information we need. Why get into lists where you listed off the different types of Negoim? Again, we don't know exactly what the list said. We just know that Rabbi Shua ben Karcha said you could have so much more simply presented the facts by saying anything whiter than Krumbeya, including Krumbeya, is Tamei al Tanega, and in any color in that group of colors, in that range of colors, are Mitzar. Amar loy, so he answered, loy malach, to tell you, the reason why the colors were pointed out is to teach us a side point, that any person who doesn't know clearly these colors are, he shouldn't be someone who is looking at Nagoyim. If you don't know your stuff well, when it comes to Nagoyim, stay away from it. Now, what did Rabbi Shua ask his father? Why doesn't it just say Mikrum Be'ulamayla? Right. Now, if you remember,
you need to have conversation.
If you remember that according to our Mishnah, according to Rebbe's version, the Mishnah that we quoted, they're groups, right? There's two tracks. There's the Beharis track, and then there's the Se'ez track. According to the way we want to present Rabbi Akiva, there's one track, right? Now, if there's two tracks, what Rabbi Shua ben Korcha should have asked his father was, why didn't you just say it simply that Mikrum Be'u Ulamayla is Tameh and Misid Heichel Ulamayla is Tameh? Because there's two tracks that he should have addressed. So if Rabbi Akiva presented to his son Rabbi Shua two tracks, well then the question that Rabbi Shua ben Korcha should have asked his father was, why don't we just present the two tracks by saying Misid Ulamayla and Krum Be'u Ulamayla? And he didn't say that. So the ilu misir heichel ulamayla loy kamar. So mita loy amar lay. Since the question that Rabbi Shua ben Korcha asked his father only included one track, Shemami Nod must be the Shamil Rabbi Akiva. He must have heard from Rabbi Akiva, which prompted his question. The Amar Kuli Leva Adi Se'es Mitztarfin. It must be that all of these colors, both Sir Heichel and Krunbeya and Tapachas, will all be toilers, will all be connections to Seis, because he only made one track. So you might ask, what about Beharis? What about Beharis? Right? Beharis should also be in this list. So Rashi explains once again, since Rabbi Akiva does not apply this apachas to the Beharis, only to the Seis, so we would learn that Seis, anything under Seis, will combine with Seis, but Beharis is only purely Beharis. Frag the Gemara, maybe that's what Rabbi Yeshua ben Karcha meant when he asked the question. V'dilma Seis v'saldosa and Beharis is saldosa. Just because when the Brisa quoted Rabbi Yeshua ben Karcha's question, it only quotes the part of the question where he said Mikrum Beita Ulamayla, it would have been enough to say he probably asked both, but the Tana doesn't bother listing off every last detail. We get the message just from mentioning the words Mikrum Beita Ulamayla, but maybe in fact Rabbi Yeshua ben Karcha was addressing two different tracks. So therefore, we don't have a raya from Rabbi Shua ben Korcha's conversation with his father that his father had only one track and everything would connect to Seis. So therefore, we have to find another makar that Rabbi Akiva says that it's all one track. Elami de Rabbi Chanina. The Amar Rabbi Chanina, Moshel de Rabbi Akiva Lama Darvadayim. Let me explain to you with a moshel how you would rate Rabbi Akiva's nega color rating system. If you had 4 cups of milk, one you added 2 drops of food coloring of dam, right? Clearly, every every step makes the white a little bit more red. Chakulin Maris Loivenheim. They're all types of white. El Shazeh Lamaila Mizeh. Mizeh Lamaila Mizeh. So right off the bat, you clearly see there's no two tracks. It's all one system, and one is wider than the next. So from the way Reb Chanina, the Tana, described Reb Akiva Shita, it's clear that Reb Akiva Shita must be one track. So that's why it's not consistent with our Mishnah. Now, if you've noticed, there's an interesting, the last step, the question is it 16 drops or is it 12 drops? So what would that machlokes be? So Rashi points out that up until this point, we were doubling. It was 2, 4, 8. So the logical next step should be 16, not 12. But Tosha says, Tosha says that once it's so red already, because you've added so much dam, at that point, even going to 12 would have made a more noticeable difference. That's what Tosha says. So it's a practical thing. So Zok to Gemara. So now we've shown you, we've demonstrated that Rabbi Akiva says it's one track. But maybe Emer de Shamas Leila Rabbi Akiva B'Posel. Maybe Rabbi Akiva is talking about a mixture of white and red, because that's what the neg Adam Dam refers to. There's a negas that have streaks of red in it. Maybe when Rabbi Akiva said that it's all one track with different levels, that just means different levels of red mixed in. So you still might have your Beheris track with different levels of red mixed in, or your Sa'ez track with different levels of red. So there's two different subjects that we're discussing. We're discussing nega that has reddish mixed in, that's subject A, and then subject B is the different white levels. Just because you're describing in Rabbi Akiva one track when it comes to levels of dam, that doesn't mean he doesn't hold that there's two different tracks of white. So therefore, Eimer de Shamis Lele Rabbi Akiva B'Posel, where it's mixed with dam. But B'Cholok, if it's pure white, who said that it's one track? Maybe you still have the Beheris track and the Se'ez track, and that would be consistent with our Mishnah. So Mishamis Lei. V'chitem, and if you're going to tell me, Ke'ech de Shamis Lei B'Posel, Hachi Shamis Lei B'Cholok, if you're going to say that Reb Chanina, who described Reb Akiva's opinion in relation to the levels of red, Reb Chanina also understood that Reb Akiva said that in relation to the white, so therefore it's that same one track that applies. First of all, let's start from the source. Where did Reb Chanina see in Reb Akiva that he has one track even when you're adding different amounts of blood to it? Vatnan, I believe the Bach says changes to Vatnan, yes. Vatnan, Reb Akiva Omer, Adam Dam Shebozeh V'Shebozeh, Adam Dam in the two different tracks of white, in the Beheris track or in the Se'ez track, is Kiyayin Hamazuk B'Mayim. Ella, the difference is Shel Beheres Aza Kishelag. Beheres is very, very white, like snow, and this girsa we need to change here. So if we look into the Aleph, Ella Shel Shelag Aza, the difference is that snow white is wider than Sid. The Shel Sid Dia Himena. Frank the Gemara. That's what Rabbi Akiva said. Rabbi Akiva is connecting the Beheres to Sid, which is like what our Mishnah says, right? Ve'im Isa, if you learn like that Rabbi Akiva holds it's all one track of white, well then it should have said Shel Semer Dia Himena. But according to the way we want to present Rabbi Akiva, it's the whitest is Shelag, which is the Beheres. The second whitest is the Se'ez, which is like Tzemer. And the third is Sid. And the fourth is Krumbeya. So why did Rabbi Akiva, when he expressed the different levels, he was comparing Beheres to Sid? That's exactly the same grouping as our Mishnah. Not like we're trying to portray Rabbi Akiva as referring to. Rabbi Akiva should have said Beheres, and then comes Se'ez, and then comes the Tzemer Lovan, and that's not what Rabbi Akiva said. So it sounds almost like Rabbi Akiva does hold that there's two tracks. The Mizah Shel Tzemer Dia Himena Mi Boile. Zok to Gemara Amri Einachinami. Really, it doesn't say shall sid, it does say shall tzemer. Vatanya Rabbi Nosson Oimer, Loisha Amar Rabbi Kiva shall sid di'aimena, shall tzemer di'aimena. That's really what he said. So it's just changing what he said, and therefore there's no kasha, and in fact, we could maintain that Rabbi Kiva holds that there is only one track. Okay, so that takes us to the end of this discussion, which indicates that Rabbi Kiva, who holds this one track, is not consistent with our Tana. So just to clarify what the two opinions are, our Tana holds that Beheres, which is Kesheleg, will connect with whiteness that's like Sid, which is 1 and 3, and Sid is a tolda of the Beheres, and Se'ez, which is a little bit less bright white, which is like the Tzemer, like a white Tzemer, that connects to the Krumbeya, which is in position number 4, and they're like a set, and they're mitzaref with each other. While Rabbi Kiva Shita is Beheres connects to nothing, and Se'ez connects to everything. Se'ez will connect with Sira Heichel and Krumbeya and Tzapachas, whatever that is. Okay, so that's that Shita. Now we're ready to start fresh. Uminalan the Beheres Azar. We've all agreed that Beheres is the brightest white compared to white snow. Amar Abaye, Amar Kra. Abaye said, we see it from the pasuk. Because what does the pasuk say? V'im Beheres levanahi. If it's a white Beheres, but if you analyze the wording, the Torah says levanahi in reference to Beheres. He levana ve'nacheres levana. The white of a Beheres is white that no other white compares to. It's unique in its whiteness. So that's how we know that Beheres is the whitest of the white. Tanu Rabbanan, Beheres amuka. Now the rule is that the brighter a color you have, the deeper it looks when you're looking at it in a background of a darker color. So for instance, if you're looking out at the sun, it looks like the sun is deeper set in to the atmosphere or to the skyscape around it. Or if you look at the moon and you look at the dark sky around it, it looks like the moon is deeper. I never picked that up. I don't understand it, but that's the rule that the Gemara is teaching us. So therefore, the whiter the white, the deeper it looks set into its surroundings. The Torah, when it refers to the white nega in someone's natural colored skin, the white looks deeper. Just like the sun that looks like it's deeper set in than the shade around it. Se'es is the first nega listed. Se'es is apachas. Ein se'es ala gavoya. Se'es means it looks like it's higher up, closer to us, because it's not as bright a white. The chenu oimer al kol haharim haramim v'al kol hagavois hanasois. Now here I need help because I looked up the pasuk, and the pasuk is referring to HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to punish every the nations that hurt us, and it says al kol haharim on all the high mountains v'al kol hagavois hanasois. So gavois I thought means the valleys, right? Yet it's saying on the source that they're higher up. So I'm not sure how the Gemara is extracting from this pasuk that se'es means higher. I'm sorry? Hills? So gavois are hills? Oh, so that's my thing. I don't know what a geva is. I thought a geva is a valley. So a geva is a hill. So the hills that are raised, okay, pashut. Sepachas, the pasuk says sepachas. Ein sepachas elot feva. Sepachas always means it schleps along. It's not the main color. It's a supplementary color. The chenu omer, it says in the pasuk. This is an interesting pasuk. This is when Shmuel was telling Eli that because his children did not behave properly, they're going to lose the kahuna. They're not going to be able to get their own Trumas and Maisra, so they're going to be hungry. So they're going to have to go to other Mishpachas Kuna and say, when you get your Matas Kuna, can you please share some with me? So you see their Tofel. So that you see the Lashon Sapachas is a Lashon of Tofel. Zogt Gemara Ashkechon Tfeila L'Se'es. we find in the pasuk that Se'es has a sapachas, which is a subordinate to it. Tveidel beheresh minalam. How do you know it's also tafel to beheresh? So how do you know that beheresh also has something that could connect to it that's not as strong as it, such as the Sidahechel? Omar Bzera, Nemra Levana B'Se'es. The Torah uses the word Levana when it's referring to the Negav Se'es. V'Nemra Levana B'Beheres. And the Torah uses the word Levana white in reference to the Beheres. Ma Levana Hamur B'Se'es Yesh La Tfela. Just like we've proven that Se'es has supplementary colors to it. Af Levana Hamur B'Beheres Yesh La Tfela. Now, this, of course, is not consistent with Rabbi Kiva. This is consistent with the Rabbanan. Because according to Rabbi Kiva, Baharis is isolated, and all the tefillas only apply to the Se'es. But according to the Mishnah that we said is not consistent with Rabbi Kiva, Baharis has its subordinate, which would be number 3, which is Sidahechel, and that's why we're comparing Levana to, we're using Levana to compare Se'es to Baharis, which is exactly what Dovi said when we first saw the puzzle. But Masnizatana, in a brisa we learned, Hitala Kosov, Lisapachas, Bein Seis Libaharis, exactly your words, Loimalach to say, Kishem Shetfela Lisaes, Kach Tfela Libaharis. The same way that the Sapachas, that's right after the word Seis, tells us that the Seis also has supplementary colors, so too Baharis, which is right after Seis, is also connected to the Sapachas to teach us the same thing. Seis Ketzemer Seis is like white wool. My temer loven. What does white wool mean? Amar Bibi, Amar Abasi. It's temer noki ben yoimai. It's clean white wool. As Rashi explains, shemachavnin boy lemelas, that you protect it to make it into melas, which are very high quality, super white wool. So Rashi says that when a baby's born, the mother licks it off and cleans it, and then right away they put some type of wrapper around this baby to protect its wool from becoming dirty. So mechavnin boy means you put a protective thing around it. The Lashon Kivin Rashis is like the loop, like you wrap something around and then you got to connect the two ends to hold the wrapper around. So there's some type of loop that's placed there to hold the two sides together so that the semer growing on this sheep remains pure and clean. Amar Chanina, Mashal the Rabbanon Lema Darvitay. The Rabbanon who creates two tracks, the Se'es track and the Beheres track, how would you compare it? Zogt Reb Chanina, L'trei Malchi, you have two kings, U'L'trei Ifrachi, and two second in commands to the kings. What is exactly an Ifrachi? Does he touch what that is? It's an officer or some type of second in command. Governor? Oh, like Governor Trudeau. L'trei Ifrachi, two presidents and two governors. Malchi, Shalzeh, L'mayla b'malcha Shalzeh. King A is a little bit stronger than King B. The Ifrach Shalzeh, L'mayla m'Ifrach Shalzeh. And the officer of King A is a little bit above officer of King B. The problem is this order is exactly Rabbi Kiva's order because it's also creating 1, 2, 3, 4. Hi zeh l'mayla mizeh v'zeh l'mayla mizehu. So that's really more of an example of Rabbi Kiva. It's not showing two separate tracks. So a better way to express it would be King A is a little bit stronger than Governor A, and King B is stronger than Governor B. That's better expressed as two separate tracks. No, he's not. We're not see in the first rendition, it made it look like it was King A, then King B, then Governor A, then Governor B. Now we're saying no. King A, Governor A, King B, Governor B. And we're not talking about a relationship between King B and Governor A. We're just focusing on the two tracks. Ravada bar Av Omar Kagoin Malka, a king, Valakpata Rafila. And Alakpata is I'm sorry, it's going Malka Alakpata and Rafila Varesh Kalusa. Malka is the greatest, is the king. Alakpata is like the a lesser king. Rashi says Alakpita is a little bit less chashuv than a king. Rafila is the head general. Someone touched it as the general of the army, and then Resh Galusa, who is like the governor. So again, it creates a 1, 2, 3, 4 scenario, which again the Gemara rejects. Hai Zela Maila Mizehu. It's Rabbi Kiva's track. Elakalin Malka Verufila Valakavta Resh Galusa. So now it's creating 2 tracks. Rav Amar, Kagoyin Shvar Malka, Rav got personal. He started referring to specific people. Kagoyin Shvar Malka, the Kesar. Shvar Malka was the Persian ruler, and Kesar was a Roman ruler, but the Roman ruler was much stronger and more powerful than the Persian ruler, which is interesting why Rava would have presented them. Why would he presented Shvar Malka first? Because Rava presented what seems to be a weaker king before the Kesar. Rav Papa questioned him. Amalei Rav Papa Rava, Hai Minayu Adif. Which one of these is greater? To indicate that isn't the Kesar greater? Amar Lei. So Rava responded, "Did you just crawl out from under a rock? I don't understand. Have you been hiding in the forest all your life that you don't know who's stronger, right? You know Rome is strong. So Pukhazi, go look Tividaman Sagibama, whose image, whose customs, who's taken over the world. You'll see clear the Romans are bigger." So Rashi says, so why did Rava present Shvar Malka first? Because Rava was right under the ruler of Shvar Malka. And Rava was afraid not to mention Shvar Malka first because he was right underneath him and he didn't want Shvar Malka to be offended. But of course, the Roman Empire was much more powerful than Shvar Malka. Dichsiv, it said, I'm sorry? No, I guess there was a conversation. You don't want to hear the conversation. You don't know who's listening. Yeah. Tichsiv, it says, and this is Daniel saw a dream of different animals that were coming out, and the Malach was explaining to Daniel which Malchus is represented by each of the animals that he saw coming. So it talks about one animal, which is referring to Malchus Raimi, and it says about them, Kol Ara. It's going to eat up the whole land. It's going to swallow up the whole land. The Roman Empire is going to take over everything. It's going to grind it up. Basically going to take everything over and put its imprint. So the Roman Empire was the biggest. Amar Bechanan, Zu Raimi Chayeves, which Rashi says is the Aramaic word for Raimi Harashah. They were very holy, beloved people. The wicked Roman Empire. Shetiva Yatza B'chol Kulai. I assume Tiva is Milosh Medbei. Its temple, its image was imprinted on everywhere. I guess its culture took over the whole world. Is that how he attaches it? It's authority. Okay. Ravin Amar Kagoin Glima de Amar V'Sachke, like a beautiful white woolen beged compared to an older white woolen beged. So it's a much deeper. It's a much deeper white, Rishalari white, and Sedin the Kisna V'Sachke. Again, that's 2 tracks. It's much easier. Okay, we'll stop here, and tomorrow I'm going to say Shir only on Zoom because I'll be in Lakewood, so we'll learn at 6:00. I'm lucky davening at 7:40 there, so I can from 6 to 7. I'll have plenty of time to get to shul. Everybody should have an awesome, wonderful day. Thank you.